So I did promise I'd do a little section on heavy rock. So for all you rockers out there, this is your time. Now this is a genre that's very close to my heart as a teenager. This is where I was at. And back then, the double live album was a big thing. You know, someone has come up with a double live album. It sort of had this sort of mythical attachment to it, and therefore it must be good. It's a double live album. So there's quite a few to choose from in this genre, and I'm just going to run through a few of my favourites, and also one which is magnificent but equally disappointing at the same time. So recently, in January, I had the great pleasure of going to a double bill here in Melbourne of Whitesnake and the Scorpions. Whitesnake were one of my favourite bands of the 80s. And the Scorpions I never got to see, so it was a great opportunity for me. And the Scorpions I had only previously heard on their live album Worldwide Live, which you'll see up there behind me. And although they're a little bit of a corny, slightly cheesy band with all their big ballads, they're also a fantastic hard rocking band, and their riffs were absolutely magnificent, really engaging, and toe tapping. And they had a whole plethora of sing-along songs to go with that. And Worldwide Live is highly energized. There's lots of crowd interaction, really energized album, and very listenable as well. So that one's right up there for me. With Whitesnake, I'm more of a fan of those early Whitesnake years, which were much more blues orientated with a bit of soul as well as rock and roll. So there was less of the hair metal and a little bit more soulful. And Live in the Heart of the City typifies that period for me in a number of ways. Firstly, it was, I suppose, my favourite time of the band, and also it was at Hammersmith Odeon, and the Hammersmith Odeon had this sort of revered status by bands in the 80s, particularly in the heavy rock genre. There's a number of bands that brought it into their own legend, and this one is a fantastic live album but recorded on 2 different tours, but it does capture amazing interaction between the band and the crowd, in particular singing Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City, where the whole crowd just is singing it and David Coverdale's just conducting them, and it's wonderful stuff. So that one has long been a favourite of mine. The one that really sort of I love but also disappoints at the same time is another Deep Purple alumni, which is Rainbow. Very powerful band, amazing singer Ronnie James Dio, and there's some really good stuff on here. It's powerful with Cozy Powell on drums. But for me, what frustrates me about this, everyone says, well, why is it disappointing? Well, it's disappointing for what's not on here. For example, there's an amazing album they did called Rainbow Rising, and there's not a lot of stuff from that album on here, but there is a whole side dedicated to one song from Deep Purple called Mistreated. So this one is sort of equally thrilling and disappointing in equal measure. So that's Rainbow on Stage. I'm going to have to nominate this CD of mine as well, AC/DC If You Want Blood. My goodness, what an amazing energy these guys produced, and never more potently captured than on this one. I think there was some claim about a lot of overdubbing being done on this, but I really don't care. It is just fantastic. Don't listen to it while you're driving. You will end up either dead or with a speeding ticket. Fantastic CD. But whilst I can't claim it's the best, I do have a favourite. It may be the best, maybe not. But as I say, this is a very personal thing. UFO, Strangers in the Night, would go down probably as one of my favourite live albums. And the reason is this captures one of my favourite hard rock bands at their absolute peak. In fact, I'd probably say that this is their best album. It captures them on a tour they did of the States, I think often in support of Blue Oyster Cult, and I don't think they did better recordings of any of the songs on here. And Michael Schenker, their guitar player, was on fire at this time. He was a very eccentric man, and they definitely had a very fraught relationship within the band, and but his musical interaction with the singer Phil Mogg is exceptional and never better than on here. Some of his soloing and his little guitar bits that blend in with the song are fantastic. The energy is fantastic and never bettered for them. And he left the band during the course of this tour, and it just left us all wondering what they might have achieved if he'd stayed. But never got to see this band, and one of my big regrets. And this is the best I have in terms of seeing them live, and I listen to this one quite frequently and have ever since I was a teenager. Michael Schenker was one of the, I suppose, early concerts that I went to on his solo career, and he did do a good live album called One Night at Budokan, but his playing on here is fantastic, and he does have an excellent band, but I don't think it quite captures the same energy as the UFO one, but also worth checking out if you haven't already. Which leads us to the 80s and 90s, so I'm going to put those into one bucket. There's another change really, moving from the 70s to the 80s. The record companies have become a lot more corporate and a little bit more commercial than in the 70s, where it was a little bit more indulgent and perhaps a little less supervised. There weren't so many of the, I suppose, the double live albums that were so synonymous with the 70s. Perhaps the first landmark live album for me in the 80s was by U2, so Under a Blood Red Sky. These guys had started in the late 70s and were billed, I suppose, as the next big thing from quite early on. But their early music didn't really sort of penetrate very widely. I think War they started to get some traction with, but they very cleverly released Under a Blood Red Sky as a low-budget single album, and it really caught the best of their early albums live and captured their energy beautifully at a concert at Red Rocks in Colorado. I think they really hit their stride live, and Bono really started to know how to work a crowd. He probably hadn't got quite so pretentious as he is now, and so fantastic album, and it introduced them to a whole new audience. So much like the Peter Frampton album did, this one really broadened their audience and made a load of us, including myself, want to explore their back catalogue. And very shortly after this was released, I went to see them live, and they were fantastic. So this was a terrific live album from the 80s and very influential. There are also some good live albums from Dire Straits and Alchemy. I happen to also really like Supertramp Paris. For some reason, critics pan this, but it's actually a beautifully recorded album, captures them at their peak as well with the Breakfast in America tour. So there's some good live stuff going on. Another favourite band of mine from the 80s was InXS, and I first saw them in 86, I think, in Guildford Town Hall or Civic Hall or something in the home counties in England. Listen Like Thieves tour, I believe it was. But they did suffer from a few corporate decisions with their live albums. So they produced Live Baby Live, which was a single album effectively compiled from a number of tour dates around the world. And it really, whilst it captured reasonable performances of each song, it lost the, I suppose, sense of occasion and the flow of the show. So it was a really disappointing effort. They even slipped in a studio track in there as well, which was not a bad track, but it interfered with the album. But more recently, they released Live at Wembley Stadium, and this shows the whole concert from beginning to end, and I think you can get this now on double vinyl as well. So that really captures the energy and is well worth exploring. But it just goes to show the more corporate approach to live albums that's coming in the 80s. But when I think of live music in the 80s, I really start to think of one band and one band alone, and that is Queen. This is a band that had honed their craft and I suppose created some amazing music all through the 70s and really latched on to the audience participation. You know, if you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, the stamp stamp clap of you know, We Will Rock You, they really absolutely nailed it. But I think it was only in the 80s that they started to get the audience size that really, I suppose, brought their music to life. And with this band, the bigger the better with the crowds. So the year after Live Aid, where they really came to the world's attention, they did a stadium tour. And I think on that Live Aid performance, they realised what they could achieve with a crowd in a stadium. So in '86, they played, I think, 3 nights in a row at Wembley. They had so many applications for tickets to those shows that they then added on another one at Nebworth, just north of London. So this is a record of their tour. It's Queen Live Magic. So it's a single album, and it suffers a little bit from the same decisions that made on the InXS one, in that this is a compilation from the tour. And I think you can probably, actually you can definitely get Queen Live at Wembley, which is the whole show, which was only released, I think, in 1992 after Freddie Mercury died. So that one I think I'm going to be checking out. But this one is dear to my heart because it does did record some songs from Nebworth, and here is Nebworth. As you can see, that is a massive crowd. I think 145,000 people, and a beautiful summer's day. And there is my ticket from said show, and it was a really amazing day. We sort of, I think we got there around midday and left at 7 in the morning. Amazing show, Billowy Sun opening, Status Quo on there as well. Just a lot of fun. I think the stage is down here. I was just about here somewhere. So that is just an amazing thing to listen to. And if you want to really see them at work, do yourself a favour and watch the Live at Wembley DVD. This just shows the genius of Freddie Mercury and takes that Live Aid performance that you may have seen and just takes it through the whole show. Quite incredible to watch. So Queen Live at Wembley, if you're missing some live music, that's an excellent place to start. Now, I can't finish tying up the 80s until I've mentioned Talking Heads' Stop Making Sense. What a fantastic live album this is. Originally recorded as a film by Jonathan Demme, but released as a single album. So Talking Heads at their peak, absolutely fantastic. Starts off with David Byrne just walking out on stage with a tape recorder or tape player and saying, "Hey, I've got a tape I want to play you." Now, just so danceable, so listenable, highly energized, takes songs to new places from the original recordings. A perfect live album for my money, but except for the fact that originally it was not their full performance. It was all condensed down to one single album, but this later reissue on CD, it has the entire performance on, well worth seeking out. So can highly recommend that. And this is where CDs come into their own, particularly for live music. No changing the sides over, get the full experience. So Talking Heads Stop Making Sense, perhaps one of the all-time greats as well. And there's a coda to that in that at the tail end of last year, I got to go and see David Byrne on his American Utopia tour. And there is a live album now available of that. This is a groundbreaking live album, or it was a groundbreaking concert, shall I say, and a good live album of that. As you'll see, everyone here is barefoot and matching suits, so it was a very arty, highly choreographed show, with the stage completely bare, not a single cable, not a single mounted instrument or microphone on there. They had this rope curtain all the way around it, so musicians could come and go through the curtain at any given point. And every instrument was carried, all the percussion, instead of a drum kit they had a Brazilian drumming troupe carrying all their percussive instruments. Quite fantastic. And this one brings, I suppose, Stop Making Sense bang up to date. Combines it beautifully with David Byrne's solo material. Absolutely fantastic. The one thing I would say about this is that perhaps because of all the radio miking going on, sometimes the sound doesn't have quite the same impact as Stop Making Sense, but still a remarkable show, amazing record of it, and this one's well worth exploring if you're a Talking Heads or David Byrne fan. Now, the 90s for me is where everything started to go horribly wrong, musically anyway. Grunge really hit like a ton of bricks and really broke down, I suppose, a lot of those original sort of hard rock genres and superseded them. And grunge was like a little bit of a second coming of punk, I suppose, in a way, challenging the norm, and musicality perhaps wasn't the main crux of what they were trying to do. It was more energy and statement. But MTV was very prominent at that time, and one of the things that MTV did do that they should be very proud of is the Unplugged series. Now, talking about grunge, Nirvana were one of, I suppose, the big bands at that time, as I'm sure you'll know. And although I was never a fan of their particular brand of grunge, their Unplugged album is absolutely superb. And it really, I suppose, got to the essence of their songs and the emotion of Kurt Cobain. Movingly enough, this was, I think, the last thing that Kurt Cobain recorded before he died, and it is quite superb. I think they've now reissued this on a double vinyl at 45 RPM, so it sounds really magnificent, I believe. I've got the CD version, as you can see. That one is absolutely priceless. Two others that really are outstanding for me. Eric Clapton Unplugged is absolutely stunning. Bare basics, acoustic Eric Clapton, sounds fantastic, and yeah, just beautifully recorded. And Neil Young Unplugged, this is also a fantastic piece. His songs lend themselves perfectly to this particular format, being played acoustically, highly emotive, very subtle. You can hear every detail of the playing on there. It's absolutely stunning. You know, I'm not a massive Neil Young fan, but on this one he really, really shines. But perhaps my favourite of the Unplugged series is one of the lesser known ones, which is Rod Stewart. And on this one, there's a lot of joy in this. He takes the songs, I suppose, back to basics, and Ronnie Wood makes a substantial appearance on here as well. So that one is absolutely fantastic. Rollicking Rod Stewart on this one. Can highly recommend that. Beyond that, since the 90s, really, I can't name many great live albums. Maybe I suppose the emphasis moved more to audio-visual productions and much more choreographed things, so there was perhaps less market for it. But if I'm mistaken, please let me know, and I'd love to hear of some great live albums apart from those from the older artists from 90s onwards. So there it is, a bit of a potted history of live music from the 60s onwards. But I'm sure there's heaps that I've missed out on, and you'll probably go, well, what about this one? What about that one? Well, let me know. Send me a note in the comments field. Drop me an email to heardandseenmusic@gmail.com. I'd love to explore some more live music that you might be able to recommend. If you've enjoyed this, let's expand the conversation. Send this out to your mates, get some people commenting and debating what the best live albums are or your favourites. Certainly I'd love to hear, and there's so much great stuff out there. In the meantime, enjoy whatever live music you can at home, and we look forward to getting back out there and getting to some seriously good gigs, getting our finery on and hearing some fantastic live music. Till next time, thanks for watching.